This session is being recorded. The recording will be made available to all of you once we've uploaded it. And there's a URL where you'll find all the resources associated with today's session on the link on your screen, which my colleague Catherine will put into the chat as well. How many of you at any point in your lives, particularly over the last couple of years, have experienced undesired change? Now, if you manage to get to 2024, I'll be surprised if not every single one of you has got your hands up. Particularly the things that have happened over the last few years, there seems to be constant, never-ending, incessant change. Much of it is change that we haven't asked for, nor change that we desire, yet it happens. How many of you have worries or concerns about future changes? You know, based on the current trajectory, I have no idea what's going to happen next. Aliens attack, asteroids, and I'm not saying that to scare you. It can't be any more radical or drastic than some of the things that we've already experienced. So yes, it may well be that many of us are fearful, concerned, or anxious about things that are yet to come, let alone the things that have already happened. But on the flip side, how many of you are not concerned with change or how to deal with it, or have not been impacted by experiences of radical change at all ever before? Okay, not quite so many hands going up. So it feels like we're all in the right place. Thank you, firstly, for investing your most valuable resource to be here today, which is your time. And time brings constant change. There is a universal law of impermanence. It's a law of physics that nothing in this universe is permanent, not the universe itself. This universe at some point will cease to exist. This galaxy, this solar system, our sun, our very own planet Earth at some point will cease to exist. Everything is in a constant state of flux. Everything arises and then passes away. But sometimes we get attached to things that are temporary and struggle with the change associated with the natural evolution of the reality around us. Nothing is static. And it's when things don't stay as we want them to be is when we start to experience stress, concern, and anxiety. And given that over the last couple of years, more and more people have struggled with the overwhelming demands made of us as the world changes so radically and drastically around us, that it felt to us it was very important we have some time to discuss this, and that's why we put this session on. Those of you who have never attended one of our sessions before, just wanted to give you a bit of a background as to who we are and why we're here. But firstly, how many of you have attended a session with us previously? Seeing a few faces that were with us yesterday. Excellent. Oh, many of you. That's lovely. We always get our wonderful sort of regulars that turn up to our monthly sessions, as well as obviously a lot of new faces. And what I'd like you to do, while I'm just giving a bit of a background, let's just also get a sense of where you're from. We're so grateful that we've got such a big geographical spread. And even when we run small workshops, we can end up with people from 12 to 15 different countries. So if you just want to drop into the chat where you're from in the world, so you put your name and where you're from. And whilst you're doing that, I just want to give a bit of background on us. So we are not a new organization. We've been around for 21 years now. International Wellbeing Insights is a consultancy organization that gets to work with some of the biggest organizations and international organizations on the planet to essentially work together to create a happier, healthier, more resilient world. That is our ultimate vision. We are the commercial consultancy arm of a non-profit organization called the Stress Management Society, which again is here to leave the world better than we found it. Now, even though we've been around for 21 years, it feels like the world has become more challenging, more stressful, and the prevalence of mental health issues has only increased in the time that we've been in existence. And that's not through lack of effort. It's through the fact that society seems to become more demanding and more overwhelming and more challenging. And really, it's our role to consider how best can we support people navigating these periods of change. I had the opportunity to work with many different organizations in many different parts of the world. And, you know, the reality is, I think we've now started to get a good sense of the human experience, the human condition. And as much as we may focus on the differences and the national and cultural differences, and we may eat different foods and read different books and pray to different gods, but actually there's way more that we have in common than separates us. And it's through those kind of core human drivers and the ever-changing nature of the human condition that's allowed us to develop these programs that are applicable to everyone, regardless of where you're from, what background, what culture, what nationality that you happen to be from. So this session isn't just us talking at you or to you for the next 55 minutes. This is a workshop. And yes, I appreciate there's 80, 90 of us here, but there will be lots of opportunities for you to get involved. This is a safe space for us to have an open discussion. So if you can, please put your cameras on. It's a lot easier to feel comfortable opening up and sharing when you can see the people that you're talking to. In terms of content, it's not necessarily about giving information. This is about us having a dialogue, debate, discourse, and discussion. Lots of questions are going to be asked throughout the session. Get involved. Unmute yourself. Come on the microphone. Put something in the chat section. My colleague, Catherine, give us a wave. Catherine, who is waving right now, is here to support me, and she'll be bringing all of your discussions from the chat into the main session. And if I've forgotten to introduce myself, my name is Neil Shah. I'm the Chief De-Stressing Officer at the Stress Management Society and the Chief Insights Officer at International Wellbeing Insights. So, as I said, lots of opportunities for you to get involved. We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. Ask questions, share your experiences, disagree with me, seek clarification. Tell me to slow down. I'm from London. I get excited sometimes. I might start speaking quickly. If you would prefer me to slow my pace, I'm more than happy to do so. Whatever you need at any time, I'm here to help and support you in any way I can, as is my colleague, Catherine. So a couple of ground rules to ensure that this is a safe space for us to explore, you know, potentially what can be at times a polarizing discussion. Particularly given the fact that some of us may feel positively about some of these changes, some may not. You know, we saw this particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, where some things that were changed, some people were very much for it and some people were against it. And we saw this polarity where in the past, we could have just got to the point where we agreed to disagree. But somehow it got to the point where if you don't agree with the accepted narrative, you are the enemy and you must die. And that has made it really hard for some of us to navigate periods of change, because you can't ask questions or debate, discuss or explore or even challenge some of these things. This is a safe space to do so. So there's some ground rules that I think are important to ensure that we feel safe in doing this. I want you to be present. I know that it's easy to get distracted. You may have another screen in front of you, other devices that are likely to buzz, bleep, ring and vibrate. You will get out from this session what you put in. So if you are half present, you're going to get half the value. So I do encourage you, if you can, it's only an hour, limit other distractions. If you can, put your other technology off or put it on silent. Participate. What you put in will determine what you take out. So I encourage you to get involved. Do your 50%. Be open, honest, and respectful. If someone shares something you don't agree with, have an open mind, allow them to have their perspective and you have yours. You don't necessarily need to agree with them or even with me, but at least be willing to show empathy and see things from someone else's perspective. Confidentiality, we operate Vegas rules. What are the Vegas rules? Actual question, not a rhetorical one.
What's said on the workshop stays on the workshop.
Absolutely. What's said in this session stays in this session. So if someone shares a thought, a feeling, an opinion you don't agree with, it's fine. But it does not get shared outside of this session. The only caveat to that is anything I offer, any of the stories, case studies, analogies, frameworks that I offer, you have my permission to share that with anyone that's willing to listen. And the only other caveat is if someone mentions something in the session that's likely to impact your safety or the safety of others, that is the only other time that we will break confidentiality. Or we are happy to agree to the ground rules, particularly that around confidentiality. So just have a show of hands or a virtual thumbs up. So we all agree to operate this space as a safe one. Thank you. So we are here to talk about change. Change is constant. Change is inevitable. Change is necessary. Suffering is optional. Yet many of us do suffer when things change radically and drastically around us. So I want us to spend a bit of time thinking about this. Think of a significant change that you've experienced at some point over the last couple of years, or one that is yet to happen, that might happen. It could be a life change, it could be a personal change, it could be having a family, it could be the passing or the potential passing of a loved one. It could be, things that are happening on a more global scale. The one that I often use as an example is, what happened in 2020 during COVID and the subsequent lockdown. There was a significant period of massive societal change that was enforced upon us with no preparation, with no forewarning. And that was very challenging for many. And obviously, we're seeing the after effects, the amount of people that have ongoing sort of issues with the mental and emotional health as a result of not being able to navigate that period of change. We saw serious repercussions from that. So thinking of kind of the change you experienced, what were your reactions? How did that impact you? So it would be really nice to hear from a couple of you. If you want to unmute yourself, jump on the microphone. What happened to you during that period of change? What were the kind of steps you went through? So Geeta, you got your hand up if you want to go first.
Yeah. Hi, Neil. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah. But I think one of the biggest things that happened to me in the past 2-3 years was that I was actually sacked from my job. I was let go because I had a kind of a medical issue because of which I was suddenly taken to emergency. I was bedridden. I was diagnosed with a cyst in my brain, and that made me immobile for quite some time. And about 6 months after, they just called me to a meeting and then let go of me, which was absolutely unexpected because I was on the way to recovery and I was expecting them to, give me reduced hours, but they blank out refused and said, no, we're going to have to let you go. So that put me in a spiral because I was least expecting it. And I think I overthought, obviously, the fact that I started feeling useless. I've never stopped working. Since I've been 16, I've worked. And at 46, I was let go and suddenly I had nothing to do. So I was like, after 3 decades of working, I'm jobless. I'm sitting at home feeling worthless. So that kind of put me in a tizzy. I went into a spiral of depression almost. I started going, my health started getting more and more impacted. But I think somehow there was a miraculous change in my headspace for some reason. I kind of started thinking why I should not go in that, direction, because I was just going down. And things changed, I think, when I started accepting the fact that, you can't control many situations. There are things that are going to go beyond your control. At that point of time, all you can do is accept it, breathe, and just let life lead you. And I just did that. And I found a great job in a much better place. I'm so happy where I'm right now as compared to what I was. And now I feel that whatever happened, there was an amazing reason why it happened, even though it didn't feel like that at that point. I felt miserable and depressed and depleted and defeated. But now I feel like that was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Thank you, Geeta. Yeah, and we're going to go into this in much more detail. You've kind of just, I think, encapsulated what this workshop is all about. Sometimes we can really struggle and be resistant to change, but actually change can be a wonderful, beautiful thing. And it's interesting, you've also highlighted the two aspects of change, the external and the internal. The external is what happened, the illness and the loss of the job, but then the internalization of that, because it's not what happens, it's how we choose to react and respond.
How you react to it. Yeah.
And, different people react in different ways. And in fact, we ourselves can react to the same situation in different ways, depending on where we are internally. And part of this is to look at how can we respond and react to the external circumstances in a way that best equips us to be able to navigate that. So I appreciate you kind of kicking us off with that. Winsome, you've also got your hand up. Would you like to share something? I got Winsome and Miko that've got your hands up. We will jump to Miko and come back to Winsome.
Okay, hi. Hi. I just love these things. Well, I want to say that I'm in recovery, and so I lost the ability to go to live meetings, and I didn't realize how important it was to connect with people on that level. And I don't know why I felt tear jerky, but it was a big deal, and I had some, I had some years in recovery, but that connection is vital. And like you said, the suffering is optional. So we met anyway, and it was wonderful because we got closer and it was better.
Absolutely. So Mika, firstly, thank you for sharing, and also congratulations for your journey to recovery. And obviously, there's a number of different factors that change through that process. But for you, like, if we had to explore this in the context of our discussion today, what was the significant change, both the external and the internal?
Well, people felt really isolated, and it didn't impact me because the kind of work I do, I still was going into work, and I had to have my little badge to prove I should be, driving around and going into work. But for a lot of people, just that isolation, it brought back those same feelings that they drank and drugged over, and so where people felt like they were really secure and stable, they realized they weren't, that it was literally a daily reprieve, and we just lost that connection of being together. And and Zoom was new, and sometimes the technology didn't work or whatever it was, but we met anyway. That's the thing, we were resilient, we met anyway. And sat 6 feet apart and did what we had to do. It was really great, actually.
Fantastic. Because obviously there's two changes there. Number one, the changes, rather than turning to drugs or alcohol or whatever it was that was the emotional crutch, is abstaining. But also the other change was that there was support there, but the change was that you couldn't meet in person, so you had to find a way to navigate that. And again, we can go into looking at it as a problem, or how can I make this work? How can I navigate this change even if I haven't chosen it? So again, really beautiful kind of example of how you found a way to navigate that. Thank you. Excellent. So Catherine, is there anything in the chat that's come up that we can share? If you want to maybe select a couple of comments from the chat regarding people's experiences of change.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about health changes, changes in the workplace, but there's the overriding theme that people are adapting to the changes despite the negative feelings at the beginning. People are adapting to them and learning to be grateful for what's happened.
Thank you. And this is interesting because change to your health. You could have a health problem, you could lose a loved one, could be changes at work or the loss of a job, relationship breaking up. All of these are external experiences of change. Really, what we're here to talk about is how can we react and respond in a way that is going to best equip you to navigate that. I'm not saying that some of these changes aren't going to be painful, challenging, uncomfortable, or undesirable. But that doesn't mean that we can't consider, is there a way that we can navigate this in a way that is going to minimize the trauma that we experience as a result of this? Remember I said that, the change is inevitable, the suffering is optional. It's not that we won't feel sadness or upset, but it's how can we navigate in a way that's going to best equip us? So this is really what we're here to explore. So if I can get my slides to work. There we go. So we've mapped out, well, I can't actually take credit for it. This is a lot of hard work that Catherine's put up and put in over the last few weeks to come up with this model. And it's essentially the journey of change and the steps that we go through. I think this is underpinned by some research done by Prochaska and Di Clemente in 1983. It's a model to illustrate the different stages an individual goes through when making behavioral change or adapting to behavioral change. And this is connected to how we feel, how we act, our behaviors, and how we navigate this period of external change and look at our behaviors during that process. And It's 5 steps: denial, anticipation, preparation, commitment, and then it comes to the mindset shift. The first step is denial. The initial feelings after discovering the possibility of change. You've been diagnosed with a serious illness. You've just learned of the passing of someone you care about. You've just turned on the TV and it's been announced that we've been locked down and we've got to stay in our houses for who knows how long. Whatever it might be, you've just learned that there's a war that's started in a part of the world which could have repercussions for you or people that you care about. It's what happens when you first learn of this incident. Many people go into denial. This isn't real. I don't believe this. This isn't happening. Or just disbelief and the shock means you're not even registering what's going on. How many of you can relate to this? Firstly, that initial kind of reaction is maybe numbness of like not even acknowledging that this is true. Who'd like to share some of your experiences around this? Have you had feelings where you think that this isn't real when experiencing a moment of significant change? What happened? How did you feel? What did it bring up for you? Who have we got? So Deborah Kenny, you've got your hand up. Would you like to share your experience of going into that denial? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go.
There we go. We got you now.
How many years of using Team School going? So I think so recently I've had an imposed challenge for a role that has caused me severe trauma. But initially I did that and no. They're not going to do this to me because I work for these people for 20 years. They know I'm a loyal employer. Why would they do this to me? And it was only after then when reality kicks in, you realise that, oh, they are actually intending to do this, that it all goes downhill. But I think I do, because I've been here 25 years and I have loyalty to the department I work for. So it's like, why would you do this to me? So yeah, denial is trauma kicks in pretty quickly after denial there in my case.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing, Deborah. And you know, I want to talk about a process that I went through, and I'm going to use what happened when COVID first started as an example, because it's one that we can all relate to. It's a process that we all went through collectively. There are many sort of personal examples I could offer, but this is something that we all experienced as a global society. Everyone in some way, shape or form was impacted by this. And I remember I was actually away skiing in France, and at that point it wasn't really a thing. I think that it just started in Italy, but all the people in Italy had just come over to France and were skiing happily away in France. And I think at this point, it wasn't really a big thing. I remember the day we were leaving the resort, the police and the army were in the streets shutting the resorts down and get everyone to leave. And the airports were literally rammed with people trying to get out of France. It's probably the worst thing to do when you've got something like COVID going on. Anyway, managed to get back, got the plane back, and within like 24 hours, I got really ill. It just so happened because we were in restaurants and in the sauna and skiing and in ski bars. So, I think I probably got COVID and ended up really sick in bed for a couple of weeks. And at that point, there was no talk of a lockdown. Nothing had really changed at home. I turned my phone off, went to bed, and pretty much stayed there for a couple of weeks. I woke up in a very different world. At that point, we'd gone into a lockdown. No one was going into work. I'm like, what's going on? I'm speaking to my colleagues, like, we can't do anything, can't do any work. And my initial reaction when I was well enough to try and comprehend what was going on around me is, this isn't real. I'm still tripping from being on a fever for the last couple of weeks, in complete denial. I'm actually glad in a way that had happened, because I think I would have tried to stop some of the big changes. Yeah, someone just put in 28 days later. It's exactly felt like that. Like I've woken up in a nightmare. I've woken up in an episode of Black Mirror. So I was in complete denial. But thankfully at that point, because I've been absent, my colleagues have made some decisions. Up until March 2020, we had never delivered a session virtually. We'd never done anything on Skype, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. It'd all been in person. And because I was in denial, I had to catch up with the fact that reality has shifted and I'm still operating in a very different world that was happening pre-March 2020. So this was that initial, like, this isn't happening, this isn't real, everything's going to go back to normal. And thankfully, people around me had made decisions that wasn't going to happen, so we need to adapt. So that was like the first stage of like, this is not real, this is not happening, and trying to bargain with how do I navigate getting back to how things used to be. Now, imagine that you've been diagnosed with a serious illness or you've lost a loved one. And I remember losing my dad. My dog sadly passed away just over a year ago. And it's like that, it's not real. But you can't change things. There's no way back. When someone is gone, they're gone. And yet your brain is still trying to find a way to convince you that this hasn't happened. The next phase is the anticipation response, which, and this isn't necessarily a positive or a negative. It's, you know, something's happened. I'm now anticipating what's going to happen next. So this could be, I'm looking at how do I prepare and plan to deal with this, or it could be, if I've gone into the negative, I'm anticipating that this is going to be the end of the world and I go into catastrophic thinking and I give up and I just find a way to drown my sorrows in, you know, food, alcohol, whatever. But the anticipation can be both positive and negative. It's the realization of the consequence and the impact of the change ahead, and how do we react to that? So firstly, let's just talk about the anticipation response. How many of you can think back to a period of significant change? And again, I use lockdown as a great example because we've all experienced it, where you had started to think about, well, what does this mean? What's going to happen next? My anticipation response was, the world's coming to an end. And yes, I was just recovering from being in bed for 3 weeks. I thought I was going to die. I probably was nowhere near that, but I'm a bloke, so there was some man flu mixed in there as well. I don't do getting ill very well, so I was just like, oh my God, like the world's coming to an end. I'm going to die. And it was a very kind of negative process for me because I was seeing what was happening around me, and it was reflecting the fact that I wasn't feeling good within myself. Who would like to share your examples of the anticipation response, either positive or negative? What happened to you when you went through process of change, when you started to anticipate what it would look like on the other side of that change? So it'd be great to get one or two of you on to share your experiences on the microphone. Maybe someone that hasn't shared so far. Della, go for it.
I have a lot of change in my life all the time. I'm a carer for my two boys who have special educational needs, and my dad as well, who's 84. I think something that's really helped me with navigating change is my dartboard of control, which is
I love that.
you know, is this something that I can influence? So I have to decide whether or not my worry is worth my worry. And it's not an easy thing to do, to turn off your worry, but it does help me sort of think, well, you know, if I'm stressing and what have you about this, it's not actually going to change what's happening. It's going to happen anyway. And also the thing that time marches on. You know, we can worry about stuff and what's going to happen, but time stops for no man. And, you know, there's lots of those situations where you worry about something and you're stressed about something, like going for an interview. And very often I'll say to myself, well, this time tomorrow, that interview will be done. I'll have done it. And you know, so let's just get on and do it and stop worrying about it. And it doesn't stop the worry, but it's that we're very very quick to do negative self-talk. So
Absolutely.
I try very hard to do positive self-talk, and it's almost like lying to yourself to convince yourself that you can do it and this will be okay. And I talk to my lads a lot about reframing a situation. So one of my lads struggles with personal care, and he'll have a shower and he's like, oh God, that's the first shower I've had in 3 weeks, as if it's a really negative thing. And I'm like, no, you know, everything has a silver lining. It's a positive, and you have to reframe it and lie to yourself, and it does help. So thank you.
Thank you, Della. I appreciate your input. And there's a lot of real nuggets that you've shared there. Fake it till you make it. Absolutely. You know, tell yourself something and you tell yourself it for long enough and it actually becomes true. The catastrophic thinking, the negative thoughts. Why do we experience catastrophic thinking? Why do we always think of 1,000 ways that it could go wrong and only one way it could go right? What is behind that? What's the reasons for that? And there is actually a very good reason.
I'm not sure I understand.
Is it
Have
to
a
do
guess.
with, is it,
Sorry,
can
go
you
on.
hear me? Sorry, it's Heather.
Yes, we can.
Is it like a survival technique that we've learned to
Absolutely.
survive? Yeah.
Yes, as Stephen's saying, as you're saying, it's self-preservation. It's a survival technique. That, you know, if you're looking across the savannah and there's something in the distance that most likely is a clump of grass, but there's a very small chance that it could be a lion, isn't it better to take the precautions and be concerned it's a lion that's going to eat you than, you know, we without a care in the world walking up to it, think, you know, because you're pretty much convinced that it's a clump of grass. So when you look at a situation, we tend to look at it in the worst possible case scenario to prevent ourselves from getting hurt or being eaten. Now, here's the thing. In modern society, most of the time we aren't going to die or be eaten by a lion if we get it wrong. And how this plays out, look, for example, I'll give you a personal sort of share. If I have 100 people in a workshop and 99% of those people, 99 out of the 100 people say, that was incredible, that was amazing, that was the best workshop I've ever attended, but one person says, that was absolutely terrible, that was awful. Which one am I going to focus on? Which one is going to consume most of my conscious processing power? Is it the 99 or the 1?
The one.
The one, right? Even though they are ridiculously
Absolutely
the
the one.
minority. Yeah, they are totally the minority. And actually, the representative data is suggesting this workshop was absolutely incredible and wonderful. So why is it that that fraction of a percent, that fraction percent of that entire audience is enough to derail my process? Because our brains are wired that way. However, we can change that wiring. And part of this is to consider there are people out there that we would call resilient, that don't get overwhelmed by challenges because they've wired their brains to be able to anticipate how do they navigate and move beyond, then get to derail, than to be derailed or consumed by that challenge. So this is an opportunity to consider. If you do find that catastrophic thinking coming up, those negative thoughts coming up, your ego is trying to keep you safe. Maybe even having a bit of internal self-dialogue saying, look, I know you're trying to keep me safe, but I got this, I can handle this, I can deal with this. So you're actually having that internal dialogue, but also considering ways that you can calm yourself, whether that's by taking a walk, giving yourself a fresh perspective, breathing, a breath of fresh air, taking some time to practice emotional regulation, which in itself is a form of building resilience. Catherine, is there anything coming up in the chat you'd like to share? Because I've not been able to keep up with the conversation. So is there anything from the chat that's relevant?
Lots of people agreeing that perspective is key when navigating change. Somebody mentioned rationalizing the thoughts, so thinking in 5 years, will this affect me? So that's a really good way to think about the small changes throughout your life.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine. There's an opportunity here to practice mindfulness. Now, mindfulness isn't, you know, meditating, sitting under a tree like Buddha chanting on. Mindfulness is literally being present in the moment with no judgment. What does that mean? I'm right here, right now. I'm not being consumed by the past or the future. No judgment means I'm not looking at this as a good or a bad thing. I'm just looking at it as a thing. I think it's a Lakota saying, there are two wolves, a wolf that makes you strong and the wolf that makes you weak. Which wolf will you feed? When we're considering our reaction to change or challenges, which wolf am I going to feed? And no matter how challenging the experience is, as Geeta shared at the beginning, that experience that she had led to something more amazing and wonderful coming through, because she found a way to feed the wolf that made her strong. So this is really something to consider. Step out of judgment. Don't look at it as a good or a bad experience, just an experience, an opportunity to learn and grow, which then leads us on to our next point, if I can get my slides to work. There we go. Preparation. Control what you can and don't worry about the things that you can't. So there's kind of three aspects to this: things that are totally in your control, things that are outside of your control, and things that are partially in your control. What kind of things can cause us upset, bother us, challenge us, but are completely outside of your control, particularly for our friends that are in the UK today? What is something right now that's potentially bothering most of us? I appreciate there's people from much more sunnier climates. Absolutely. The weather. I'm looking outside the window. It's grey, it's miserable, it's pouring with rain. Political issues, inflation, recession, the economic climate, the wars going on the planet. These are things that for many of us are outside of our control. Yeah, they still upset us and bother us. So if there's something that's completely outside your control, maybe park that on the side. Then consider things that are totally within your control: your attitude, your behavior, what you consume, whether that's the information you put in your mind, the food you put in your mouth, the things that you purchase. Now, sometimes people say, well, I don't have a choice. Well, at some level you do. If you hate your job, you say, well, I don't have a choice, I have to work. Then, well, you don't. You could leave. There are consequences to that choice, but there's still a choice. Does that make sense? It's not there is an absence of choice. It's the choice may not be appealing. But what I want to be clear about here, there is a choice. We don't always like the choices. But the moment you have no choice, it's totally outside your control. But for example, I live in a country where I personally don't have the ability to stop the government spending money on bombs and starting wars. So I have no direct control over that. I have a direct control of how I use my time and my energy. And then there are things that I have partial control over. What would be an example of partial control? How about this? What we're doing here today, I only have partial control of the outcomes of this session. Would you agree with that? Because we're all involved. Every single one of us is contributing to this. So anything that's collaborative process, whether that be in a team environment, in a community setting, in a family setting, where there are more people involved, relationships, exactly as you said, Kaylee, where there are multiple parties involved working towards the outcome, that's where we have partial control. So how can we productively and effectively prepare for change and ensure that we are considering and coming up with a plan to be able to control the elements that we have control over? So who'd like to share some examples or stories or experiences around how you prepared to deal with an inevitable change? Rebecca, I love that. The Serenity prayer, which I think they use in the 12-step program, is, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that one. Who would like to share an example or an experience about how you prepared for change by considering what you had control over? It'd be really lovely to hear from a couple of you. And I just want to add, your stories bring this to life. And with every step, I do want to hear from a couple of you because it really helps to bring to life what we're discussing here today. So I've got a hand go up. Julie, thank you.
Hello, everyone. All I really want to say is that we don't really have control of most things but our own very self. So it's the way I see life is basically, say, for example, you have a house. You want to decorate a house in the best way possible. We tend to decorate our houses more than we decorate our inner selves. So for me, it's about decorating the inner self of me. And that is being emotionally strong and being able to withstand and face any challenges that life will put in my way. So being resilient.
Absolutely. And Julia, I love that, because there's kind of two aspects to this, which is you're preparing yourself when you don't even know what the change is by just building that resilience. And the second aspect is we're preparing ourselves to deal with the change that we know about. So that's really beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that. I've got Alicia and Heather next before we move on to our next point. So Alicia, go for it.
Many times when there's going to be change, I mean, I moved from the US to the UK. That was huge. Brought my daughter, left family. I think that when we look at some change, we become very overwhelmed instead of being able to break it down into manageable pieces. And when I am facing huge change in my life that's going to affect more than one aspect, what I usually do is I try and make a plan to manage what I can in small manageable pieces rather than try and take on the entire problem or change at once, depending on what that change is.
Thank you. And that's great advice. Rather than being overwhelmed by the big thing, is, you know, break it down into bite-sized chunks. Absolutely love that. And Heather.
Hiya. So a big change that I went through a couple of years ago was for many years, I'm not a single parent now, but for many years I was a single parent and I raised my twin children mostly on my own. So our relationship was very, very close. And with them being twins, they both went off to university at the same time. So I massively had what they call that empty nest syndrome, in that I'd been a mom and cared for the children and then they'd gone off to university. And I found that at the time really quite difficult. And there were times I would sit and I would cry about them going, never to them, because it was a really exciting opportunity for them to go away, etc. So never to them, but to friends, etc. I'd be really miss and be really sad. But, you know, after a while, you just think, oh, this is absolutely ridiculous. So I just sort of threw myself into different things, you know, spending time with friends, looking at all the things that I could do as well, you know, so like that, like the First Lady said about nurturing yourself, really, taking more time to spend time with friends, doing exercise, doing all the things I wanted to, working, etc. So that's how, and having set times that I knew I would see the kids or still talk to them and be a part of their life. So I was just sharing that experience for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. And these are great examples. So, you know, just going back to sort of my experience, obviously there's that first step, you know, when I realized that, you know, we've now descended into lockdown, denial, this isn't happening. The second one, the anticipation response, the initial one was a negative one, which is like the world's coming to an end. But the second part of the anticipation response was, this isn't ending anytime soon. This feels like it's going to be a long time before we're out of this. So we went into then the preparation phase, and I didn't know what we could control and what we couldn't, because this had meant that everything that we were doing up till then from an organization perspective, we couldn't really do in the same way. But thankfully, my colleagues sat down straight away and went straight into preparations. What are we going to do? How are we going to make this work? And it was like, okay, we can't meet people, but there is no reason we can't transfer our model to being able to do things online. So it was now preparing to do things in a radically different way, but to still ensure that we're able to deliver the same level of engagement. So it was like, okay, we're now preparing for something that we didn't foresee, that we couldn't anticipate, but we got to find a way to make it work. Once we had made those plans, the next step is the commitment. That you've made a commitment, I'm going to do something different. And Heather, you kind of touched on that. It's like you got to a point where you got to the tears had dried up. It's like, I've got to do something different. And what was that commitment? And how did you hold yourself accountable? Who did you get to check in on you? How supported you through that process? Because if I make a commitment, I'm going to eat an apple a day and not eat chocolate again, but I'm left to my own devices, on the days when I'm feeling good and great and had a good night's sleep and everything's going well, apple's easy. But those days where I feel miserable and low energy and I'm tired, and the chocolate basket in the middle of the office is screaming at me, eat me, eat me. And we genuinely do have one of those in the office. I've literally the other day went and put a bunch of apples and naked bars on top of the chocolate. So people have to get through the apples and the naked bars to get to the chocolates, and still the chocolates got eaten first, right? So you had to work hard to get to the chocolates underneath the apples, because that was my commitment, not theirs. Does that make sense? I was doing that rather than the individual committing to that. I can't actually eat any of those chocolates, thankfully. I'm vegan and the chocolates aren't. But what I'd love to hear from you, particularly, it would be really good to have different people sharing so we get different perspectives. If you haven't shared already, who would like to tell me about the time where you made a commitment to something, but you also ensured that you had accountability and support built in to ensure you followed through with that? Whether that was recovering from a health challenge, you know, with some kind of navigating some kind of change in your life, relationship issue, loss of a loved one, change with your job. When you got to that stage where it's like, all right, I'm done with feeling sorry for myself, I'm done with feeling sad, I'm going to find a way through this, and here's what I'm committing to. Who has something that you would like to share to highlight what happened once you made that commitment and you held yourself accountable and got the support you needed? Alicia, I can see you got your hand up. It'd be really good seeing that we've got so many people on, if we can get a few different shares. So if there's anyone that hasn't shared so far that has something like to share, that would be really amazing. We learn so much by hearing different perspectives on this course. So who has an example? Maybe it was a health goal where, you know, that you'd had a challenge with your health. You made a commitment to your recovery. Maybe it was recovering from the grief or the passing of a loved one. Anyone got any examples? Mia, or is it Bibi or Mia? I'm not sure. So Sophia.
Sorry, I think my hand went up accidentally.
No worries. Have you got something you'd like to share? No.
How can I help? I suppose I can share when I was going through a depressive period. And it was hard because I've got children. I didn't want my children to know. So I'd be in my room on my own, just crying. But I just felt that it's something I hadn't brought on myself, but I felt it could have been preventable. So I didn't want my mum knowing, I didn't want my children knowing, so I thought, I'm their mum and they can't do anything. But then every time I spoke to people about medication, they kept saying, no, don't go the medicine route, it's really bad. But then after a year, I thought, I have to do this. And then I got support from my GP and from other people. Okay, no problem. I'll get that book now. And then, yeah, that's my story really.
Okay. And what commitment did you make to yourself during that period that enabled your recovery?
I think it just make sure, I think it was more taking the medication and dismissing people's views that it's not going to work, it's going to mess you up. Because I thought, we're not all the same, we're all different. Medicine may work for some people, it may not work for the other people. Just doing what's best for myself, basically.
And yeah, and I think that for me is the key operating part of your statement is you made a decision to do what was right for you and to get the help and support you needed, whatever that looks like. And obviously that could come in many different ways, and then making that commitment and following it through. So yeah, thank you. Catherine, is there anything that you want to share from the chat around people's commitments to the process of change that allow them to navigate the period of change?
Charlotte said that she's made a daily tracker to check in with herself to make sure she's making those commitments. Another way you could do it is perhaps journaling, so writing down what you're doing each day to commit to these changes and how you feel about it.
And absolutely, and Catherine, I know that the team have been using the resilience journals that the Resilience Agenda gave us, and it's literally every day. It's like there's certain things that I'm committing to improve my resilience, and mine was, you know, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes a day. I'm going to walk for an hour, but 30 minutes of that walk, I am not going to have my phone. I'm literally just going to be present with nature. Part that was the journaling. So if I'm holding myself accountable to proactive steps that I'm taking to build my resilience, as well as being able to reflect on the things that didn't go well, that in itself, that commitment I'm making to myself means that it starts to become second nature. I do these things without thinking about it. And that's really what we want to be able to see. And the final stage of the journey of a change is where you've got the mindset shift, where it becomes automatic behavior. And this is where we get to celebrate the success of successfully navigating this period of change, and we can show ourselves gratitude. Because exactly as Geeta shared with her story at the beginning, out of something challenging and potentially tragic, something beautiful and wonderful happened. She ended up getting her dream job. And I can share with you my own experience. I've been running the Stress Management Society and International Wellbeing Insights for 21 years now. The backstory to this is I started this following an experience which resulted in a significantly negative impact to my mental health. I had a breakdown and an attempted suicide. Thankfully, I failed. But it's directly as a result of this experience that I had that I do this work. And at the last count, we've helped more than 100 million people. That I'm so grateful that every day I come to work and myself and my team get to make the world a better place. Something really incredible and amazing happened as a result of some unforeseen, unexpected change in my life that happened all at the same time. I lost my business. All my money was gone, cars were repossessed. The people that I thought were my closest friends turned their back on me. The person I was in a relationship was cheating on me. All of the things that you can imagine that could create significant trauma as a result of life changes happened all in a 3-month period. And it felt like everything I defined my life by disappeared. This process that we just shared with you is very much the process that I went through when navigating that period of change. However, it took me 15 years to fully navigate that. Even though I've been running the Stress Management Society for 21 years, the first time I ever shared the part of the story where I got to the such low depths that I tried to end my own life was only 6 years ago. So I'm hoping by being able to share these models and have these discussions that it will help other people to not have to take so long to navigate these stages. Because this is how we can support each other, by learning from each other, by sharing our stories, by changing this notion that vulnerability is a weakness and turning that into a strength. And now I can sit here and tell you that now that mindset shift has happened, I am so grateful I had that experience. Even though it was the darkest moment of my life, something beautiful, incredible, and wonderful happened as a result of it. And I'm asking you to consider, no matter how challenging and dramatic and awful the experiences that we are inevitably going to have as human beings, something good can come of it. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about the fall of various civilizations and wars that happened on the planet. It was talking about World War II. Tens of millions of people died during World War II. It was a horrible, tragic, traumatic experience for all of humanity. But there was good things that came of it. What was the good thing? Longest period of peace in mainland Europe. That human rights and civil rights changed significantly across Europe because people wanted to distance themselves from the policies held by Nazi Germany. So good things came out of even tragic things. And this is really where we can consider, going back to the Lakota phrase, is even though there is trauma, how can we feed the wolf that makes us strong? In Buddhist White Tantra, and White Tantra has nothing to do with the weird sexual practice that people like Gwyneth Paltrow that seems to have Netflix programs about. It's more kind of a spiritual practice, but they talk about the greater the trauma, the bigger the opportunity for healing and growth. Does that make sense? Trauma gives us an opportunity to grow, either individually or collectively, and it's that mindset shift that can really allow us to reinvest the negative emotions created by periods of change into something positive. And this is really where we are always here to support you with that. You know, one of the reasons we do these monthly webinars free of charge is we want to be able to support people through these challenging times of change. And sadly, for many of us, trauma. And we have just launched a new product to make it easier for us to support you. It's a virtual AI-driven product. And at the moment, for all of our friends and people that are regularly in touch with us, We are offering the opportunity to try the product absolutely free of charge. My colleague Catherine will be putting the link in and telling us a little bit more about the product. So Catherine, if you could just drop the link in where people can find out more about Stress Care Protect, and would you be happy to share a little bit more about the product and why people should try it out?
Hiya, yeah, sure. So Stress Care Protect is our new flexible remote training solution. So it's a virtual training program allowing for the usual interactivity of workshops just like this through practical exercises. Because it's virtual, it allows you to engage with the material at a time and pace that suits you. So you can come and go to it when you need. It's ideal for balancing professional responsibilities and the personal commitments. So if you're interested, I've just popped a link there for you to sign up to 14 days free access to our first program, which is Excelling Under Pressure.
And the good news is you don't have to give a credit card, you don't have to pay anything. It's not one of those like give your credit card, sign up for a couple of weeks. It's a gift. Try it for a couple of weeks. If you like it and you feel that it's something you can get additional benefit from, then obviously you can make that decision. But at the moment, we just want as many of our friends to try it and give us your feedback and get the benefit you can from the product. Because ultimately, that's our core remit, is how can we help as many people as possible? So it is sadly the end of the time we've got allocated for today's session. What questions do you have? What comments or feedback or things that would you like to share before we close today's session? So feel free to jump on the mic on the chat. Let us know what you think, and we would really love to hear your thoughts.
I've actually realised I'm not doing as bad as I thought I was.
Great, that's always a bonus, Deborah.
Yeah.
And you know, here's the thing. Obviously, now you've got the model to fall back on. You can always ask yourself, what stage am I at, and what can I do to best equip myself to cope with whatever it is I'm navigating. So that's really good to hear. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Go for it, Julie.
Thank you, Neil. I just have a question for you. At the beginning, you mentioned something about resilience. My question is, why are some people built to be resilient and some other people are not? Is it the environment we are being brought up in? Is it the food? What is it? I would like to know.
It's a good question, and I think we could have a 1-hour session on that alone. And it also comes down to what is your perspective of resilience? Because, for example, someone getting up on stage and talking about their challenge with mental and emotional health and having breakdowns, etc., could be seen as a weakness, depending on your perspective. But for others, it could be seen as a strength because they're strong enough to be able to share their experience.
You know what, Neil? I think we've just found our title for next month.
There we go. Thank you.
Why don't we do resilience?
Yeah, next month we will be talking about resilience and what does it actually mean.
Nice one.
Because we do not have the time to get into that now, because that is an hour's discussion in and of itself. Louise, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what you were saying. Really, I think you hit your nail on the head really when you were talking about sort of you have to have experienced some kind of adversity, don't you, to then build resilience. You know, if you've kind of had a very easy plain sailing life, you probably aren't as resilient as somebody who's had to overcome lots of obstacles and things in their life, and and then when something does happen, it can be harder for you to manage that. But then there are other aspects as well, like what support you have around you can make you more resilient, can't it, and things like that. So yeah, I won't go into it more than that because you're obviously going to talk about it another time. But yeah, interesting.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Deborah, you've got your hand up. You've been waiting patiently.
Yeah, I've seen written patience isn't usually my strong suit, I've got to say. The thing I love about these webinars is that I can get an email from you, I can share it with people who are of a like mind, and I love the arena because I get to see lots of people that I don't work with, and it's having that, you find that common ground as humans, so no matter whether you're male, female, whether you work for this person or for that person, it's just, I feel such a sense of connection over these webinars. It's amazing. And personally, Neil, I'm glad you failed as well, because you are a total inspiration to me, and I will continue to share the wonderful work that you guys do. And if you've got any jobs going, can just bear me in mind, because it sounds fun.
Thank you, Deborah. I really appreciate that. And it's also nice that we've got people from so many different corners of the planet as well. Swati, you've got your hand up as well.
I'm also at my workplace, so I'm just keeping my camera off. And I know we are short on time, but I just wanted to hear one little thing from you. So I feel that I have been able to, I have been through the phase of disbelief, anticipation, and even preparation. But being in the commitment phase, I keep finding myself going back to the denial phase. There's always a interim period in which I feel that, okay, this is not fair, and I just broke my promise to myself. So sometimes I try to confirm myself that this is absolutely okay and might be happening to other people as well, but just wanted to understand from you that if you have already committed to the change, but then in the interim you're going back to the previous phases, how to navigate this thing.
Absolutely. It's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked it. And it's actually prompted the fact that I should have just talked into this earlier. It's not linear. This journey isn't linear. It's not like I'm in denial and then I made a commitment and everything changes. There are times that you can drop right back to phase one, and it can go backwards and forwards. Remember the phase where we are talking about accountability and support. We've made the commitment. A commitment without accountability and support is potentially setting yourself up for failure. If you're finding yourself slipping back, so after you've asked someone to hold you accountable, you're checking in with them, there is a way you're recording this, there is some kind of feedback loop in place, the chance of you staying on track is significantly higher. So I would consider who or what mechanism could you utilize to hold you accountable and ensure that you've got the ongoing support till your commitment becomes a complete shift in mindset, where it becomes second nature, it becomes habitual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand your point, but yeah, I mean, I was just coming from that perspective. Somebody has written down it in chat that it's a great way to think that if you think this particular moment is not going to affect you in the next 5 years, maybe it is not worth giving a thought. But if it is a life-changing experience, maybe a marriage or a failed marriage, or a place shift, a location shift, a geographical shift, something of that thing, then maybe a mindset shift, achieving that state, like you mentioned, may take longer than usual. Then in the interim period, how to keep yourself sane is something on which maybe some toolkit would be helpful. But absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it comes back to, as we talked about, the building the resilience, make a commitment, holding yourself accountable and ensuring you get the support whilst you commit to whatever mechanism you're going to utilize to be able to overcome the challenge or trauma associated with that period of change. But it's a really good question.
But I agree to your point that maybe I have committed it to myself, but I haven't, discussed it with anyone around me, so someone can check in on myself. So maybe
absolutely
that's the point, which I need to fix. Thank you.
Excellent. Fantastic. So some of you are asking, how will the next webinar be advertised? It will be on our newsletter list. If you do not get our newsletter, then you are missing out on all the information that we share. So we do send out a newsletter with useful information and tools and resources every single week. We do have our campaign, which is Stress Awareness Month, coming up in April. The theme this year is little by little, a little becomes a lot. So making little shifts today can take you in a completely new direction. So encouraging and supporting you making those little shifts, both individually and collectively. We need to start making shifts both within ourselves, but in our communities, in society in general, so we can take ourselves in the right direction. So we'll talk about that more, and next month, thanks to some of the shares here at the end, we'll be talking about resilience and what does it mean and how do we build it. So thank you for that. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of the day and beautiful month ahead. for those that will be joining us next month, we'll see you in a month's time. And yeah, in between now and then, any questions or any support you need, feel free to reach out. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day too.
Bye. Thank you very much.